But it's just more efficient. I feel like those quiet kids like really don't feel like talking in class. I feel like they have so much to say, but this allows them to say it.
Annalisa here from the team behind Parlay. I sat down with Kim to discuss how she uses Parlay for discussions as her classes explore a text. She shared the purpose Parlay serves in her teaching, specifically for getting the conversation started and building a foundation for literary analysis. She had a lot of great insights to share that I think you'll find helpful as you use Parlay for literature discussions. Check it out.
So I teach 8th grade ELA, and I have 2 gen ed classes, and I have 1 honors class, which is what I'm using the Parlay discussion for, is my honors.
I noticed that I guess you've been using Parlay chapter by chapter or as you're going throughout a specific text. And I noticed you did it for both Animal Farm and then what was the most recent one?
Yeah, so we're reading Agatha Christie's and Then There Were None, and it's a murder mystery. So you have the 10 characters that were invited to the island. They were all people that justified a murder or something that they had done wrong. So my students have really gotten into it. So each day I'll ask the question. It's pretty much the same question. Every once in a while, I'll throw a glitch in there just to like throw them off. It's like, who was murdered? What do you think is going to happen? So according to the poem, because there's like this poem that kind of predicts what's going to happen to the next character, but they're all like killed off one at a time. And so they're all making predictions about who they think their murderer is. And it's been so much fun because in the back there, I don't know if you can see it, but in the back, I have all their profiles. And as they're murdered off, then I just X them out with some washi tape. So they're really going to be excited tomorrow because Justice Wardgrave was killed. And I don't know, they think that's who did it. It has been great. And the reason why I started using Parlay is because sometimes in a Socratic seminar, you don't always have really good quality feedback. And with my Parlay discussions, I love that students have to answer the question first instead of relying on someone else to see what they answer. Now, I also love that I can see their edited version. So if it's typos or they didn't answer the question or if they change their mind completely, I know that they probably have not read. So they're like, oh, everybody else is saying Mrs. Brent was killed, so like I'm gonna go with her. But it's just more efficient. I feel like those quiet kids like really don't feel like talking in class. I feel like they have so much to say, but this allows them to say it. And my students have opted for non-anonymous. They love knowing who it is. And so at first we started doing anonymous. They'd all tell everybody who it was anyway. They're like, oh yeah, that's me. I said that. So like as they're doing their discussion, I still give them time in class to talk about. They're like, you did not just say that. So it's been a lot of fun. I have so much fun with students.
So did you pose that to students at the beginning of the year? Like, do we want these discussions to be anonymous or not?
Yeah. So like, as we were going, I told them like, you guys, this is an option. Do you want to know who's saying what? And they're like, yeah. So, and my requirement is that they have to respond to at least 2 other peers. And so that's kind of the requirement. I don't grade them on it. I mean, it's just to get the conversation going. You know, you can do small groups. I've done Socratic seminar for several years, but sometimes, you know, once you come around to that group, they're either off task or they're not really talking about what they're supposed to, or they're faking it. So I feel like with Socratic seminar, I can really look at the feedback. And I can interact with the students too. So I'm like, why did you just say that? Like what evidence? So like those students that I want to model or really push their thinking, I like it that I can do that, but I can sit at my desk and still have those conversations with them instead of circulating the room. I love Parlay. Yeah. I love Parlay.
That's awesome. How are you fitting Parlay into the context of the other activities? Are you doing like informal conversations and what do you do around the Parlay discussions when you're reading?
Yeah, so I haven't done a whole lot with it just because we have so much that we have to do in our curriculum that I really just get to like, it's fulfilling the purpose of getting the conversation going, getting them thinking about the text. Who do you think is going to be murdered? Why? I think one of the discussion prompts that we had last week or the week before was like, imagine yourself as one of the remaining characters on the island. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to team up? Are you going to like watch your back? Like, how are you going to survive now? Because one of you on the island, one of you is the murderer. So like when it gets down to two people, if it's not you, it's going to be them. So what are you going to do?
Right.
For right now, I'm just keeping it basic. That way I still, so when they come in, they'll do a quiz. It's like 5 questions, again, accountability, and then they'll do the parlay discussion. And then I actually give them time to read the next chapter. So I don't really give homework. I give them time in class to do it. So every once in a while, I'd be like, okay, guys, like 1 more minute of chat, and then we have to bring it back in. That's for you guys, not for me, because I could talk about it all day long. But I want you guys to not have homework. So like, we're going to hunker down and it's drop dead quiet. Let's go.
Yeah. And so you're giving them time in class to read, or are they doing that all at home?
No, I give them time in class to read. I try not to give any homework reading. I mean, even for my honor students, I mean, the work should be done at school. That's just my opinion.
Are you reminding them of anything during the discussion in terms of commenting, or what guidelines do you typically give them, or what do you need to remind them of during the discussion?
Yeah, so I'm also incorporating like theme as one of our focus skills. So that's going to be coming soon. We've done like some assignments where there's a text exchange. I know tomorrow they have like this comic strip that they have to create. There's like 6 boxes of a comic strip. So they're really doing some short questions from the chapter, like 1 sentence summary of the chapter, what happened, just for themselves. I just feel like if they're writing it down, they're more likely to remember it than if they're just reading it. So it's not heavy work, but they're more likely going to remember that text exchange when the characters were having a conversation about each other, like, oh, he said he didn't bring the gun, but he really did bring the gun. And someone else is saying, well, like he brought the gun because he's a detective. Of course, he's going to bring his gun. So it was just really fun to see them, write that text exchange. So that goes in conjunction with the parlay discussion.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what do students like about parlay, or what feedback do you often hear when you first introduce parlay at the beginning of the unit and all that?
So like I'm actively listening as they're typing, and I'm like, I'll hear them say, I never thought about that. You're right. Maybe it is Mrs. Rogers. Like that brings up a good point. And so they're writing that, but they're also talking and having those conversations. And I mean, sometimes it'll spur on those non-readers that are not actually doing what they're supposed to be. It kind of, I don't know, it just kind of makes them maybe more likely to be like, okay, I'm really missing the boat. So I introduce it. This is the expectation. I keep it simple. I'm not grading it because it's so subjective.
Yeah.
It's so subjective. Yeah. And really, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to like have the conversation. We're talking about theme. There's a lot of themes in and then there were none. We're going to start talking about justice and like, was justice served? These people took justice into their own hands and then they justified it. So like, what do you think about that? Yeah, I mean, parlay, it's perfectly fitting the need for what I have for my discussions. I love it.
That's wonderful. Do you have any suggestions or feedback on what you would change about parlay?
The only thing that at one time I've thought about doing was if I could print out like a certain student's responses, just so I can basically say like, okay, I noticed that this is what you're responding. It's not meeting the criteria, or like, I feel like you really don't know what's happening in the book. So maybe you're not reading. So just maybe encouraging them, like, where are you at with it? Did you get behind? What do we need to do to get you caught up? So I think it would be neat if I could print that out, just to kind of, keep track of those students that maybe aren't. But otherwise, for what I'm using it for, it's spot on.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's wonderful to hear. Do you use any of the data, or do you ever pull that up as you're kind of like discussing that summary tab with like the word cloud?
My students love the word cloud. I've had one student that has, from day one, it's almost a joke now, and I just like to have fun with them, but he always writes Kung Fu. So we're always looking for Kung and Fu. And I think this character just died because I heard them talking in my academic enrichment class, which is an extension of our classes. They're like, you can't write Kung Fu anymore. And he's like, I'm going to figure it out how to write Kung Fu. But so my kids love the word cloud. I have printed it out. Sometimes I'll do a screenshot of it and I'll just like kind of hang it up, or I'll show them like, this is what you guys came up with. But the word cloud's a lot of fun. I haven't really done it as much this year, but I really liked the hard close date. So that was really good. So like having the cutoff time, but then the hard close where you absolutely can't respond. Sometimes if I have students that are absent, I like that they can still go back and view the conversation. So it's nice to see that they submitted it late so I can kind of track that. But at the same time, again, my purpose is for the conversation in the classroom. If my students are absent, I don't make them go back and, go through the conversation. They can if they want to, but I have not used a hard close this year at all whatsoever.
Awesome. Well, any other notes or thoughts that you wanted to share? Any questions like that?
The only other thing is sometimes if there's multiple questions, even numbering them, and this is on the students. So I really can't ask multiple questions because they'll answer the first question and won't answer the other two. I would say, like, if I wanted to ask multiple questions, it would be nice to be able to do that.
I noticed you were like explicitly saying, like, make sure you number your answer or your answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it makes it hard. But if I'm wanting them to respond to another student, so I think it depends on what you want. If you're wanting them to respond to another student and then you're like, oh, and in response to their number 2, but then you go to another person and you're like, oh, in response to question number 3, I think it just makes it tricky to kind of keep track of that. It's a management for like teachers, but also for students. So that's where I just kind of like live and learn. And then I started narrowing it down to, I'm just going to ask one question. I know sometimes I'm asking them 2 questions, like who was killed? And they'll say like, what do you mean nobody was killed? I'm like, that's exactly what I want to know. Well, nobody was killed this chapter. And then who do you think? How do you think according to the poem? So I kind of am asking them multiple questions, but again, it's more for the conversation instead of like the data tracking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
To facilitate, that main dialogue, and having them get their ideas out on paper and then see that.
But I do like that. I mean, if I wanted to assign groups, I would have to just copy each one of those discussion questions into another discussion. I don't remember if I did that with Animal Farm last year or not, or there was another book that I thought I did small group where I just had like 4 or 5 having that conversation. I've used it for a couple of years, so maybe I'm thinking a couple of years ago.
Okay, great. Well, no, this is all really interesting, and I really like the way that you're using it. It's very repeatable and expected for each student, and it's not like there's these long, crazy essay long responses, right? It's just a quick way to get the students to share their ideas, especially around such an engaging book. So thanks for sharing.
Sure, absolutely.
I think a lot of teachers will be inspired by it. So thank you.
Absolutely. And you can always shout out and ask me a question, or, you can plug my email in if I don't mind answering questions.
For sure.
We're all on the same page. We all have to help each other out. It's not a competition. We're all trying to get the same task accomplished.